couple of videos back, I went over the process of creating punties using watch crystals. Punties are the kind of convex domes that you see on the back of a lot of reverse glass pieces. And the watch crystal method is really nice. It's certainly a way of achieving it without using any tools. But I wanted to take that a step further and actually get grinding some glass using some tools that you can get your hands on from most hardware stores. So that's what I'm going to crack on with here. But before I do that, if you're a fan of reverse glass, sign painting, gold leaf, digital processes and much more, then you're in the right place, because that's all this channel's about, and I try to release a video every couple of weeks. Also, if you'd like to support the channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description. I reward my patrons with a different vector design every month, early release to the videos, credits in the videos, and also just bits and bobs that I upload here and there. There's also a link to my Etsy shop where I'm selling some of my designs, as well as some things that I'm making out of oak, and a link to the Happy Gilder Facebook group, which is over 800 strong now, all brilliant artists sharing ideas, helping each other out. So great place to go if this is something you're interested in. Anyway, that out of the way, let's crack on with it. Okay, so before we get started, I'll just show you my sort of very rudimentary setup and some of the sort of trial and error things that I came across along the way. Also, I'd recommend before getting started that you wear sort of clothes that you're not fussed about getting dirty, because it can be a little bit of a messy process. Right, so firstly, let's have a look at the setup. So I've basically got an electric drill clamped in a vise. Now, this drill has got a sort of lock-on setting so that when you pull the trigger you can press a button so it stays on. If you haven't got that sort of drill, if you're going with a standard hand drill, that doesn't matter. All you need is a cable tie and that will stay on as well. So that's that. What I've got over here is my trial and error section. So I know I have a section at the beginning of the video that says that it was made possible by my patrons, and that is quite literally true. So I don't really make any money off these videos because the materials are so expensive. So everything you see here is the Patreon money at work. So it's a series of grinding implements, polishing implements, and some things that are kind of, you know, a bit makeshift, but we'll go over those. And what I'm going to be starting with today is this thing here. And this is a diamond drill bit. It's 30mm and it's 120 grit. Now that is quite coarse, even though this is the finest I could get my hands on. So it's going to be a case of working down to the finer grit before polishing. You can get these bigger. This one was about, I don't know, I think it was about £6 or £7. But the next one up, which was a 50mm, was about 30 quid. I thought, nah, I'm not having that. Well, I might get one eventually now that I know this works. But for the purposes of testing, this is perfect. So what I'm going to do is just lock this in here. And this is going to be stage one of cutting in the punties. Right, so I've got a bit of glass here, and I've drawn one biggish circle and then 4 small ones. So bonus with the small ones is all I've got here is a 3mm bit of glass, so it's not very thick, but a circle that size, I'm not going to have to move this piece around on here. I'm just going to be able to find the centre, grind it, and then once all of the black pen has gone, I'll just take that off and that's done. It's going to be different for the larger one, because if I just sat that there and waited until it kind of pushed through, that's going to end up going through the glass, because the curvature of that is going to kind of protrude through the glass before it's sort of erased all the black pen. So I'm going to start with the little ones and then stop and then talk through how we're going to go about doing this bigger one. All I'm going to do is turn my drill on, and this is on the lowest setting. Make sure always use your goggles when you're working with glass. And then it's just a case of carefully finding the centre of this. not that you'll be able to see it on the back of that, but that is now a convex dome in the back of that glass. So just continue and do the others. See, and there was a mistake because I went in too quick, wasn't paying attention, and now I've gone wider than I wanted to go. So I'm going to have to make this one and the others a little bit bigger. So I'm slightly pivoting this glass around ever so slightly. So that's 4 done, and they're not perfect as you can see, and because that's 120 grit, you can see, you know, that's left some pretty deep grooves going through that. So before I change the bit, I'm going to actually work on these with that, and I'm going to sort of change the angle so where this one's gone that way, I'm going to come back in, do that this way, but not kind of pressing so hard. I just want to kind of, you know, maybe just gently touch the surface of that, try and get rid of some of those deep grooves. And there, that'll do for now for those. Okay, so moving on, I'm going to get this big circle done now. And the way I'm going to do that is by starting in the centre and then pressing and letting that circle gradually grow. And then as that kind of gets to a point where I think I'm not just going to leave that now, I'm going to start like kind of just slowly rotating it. So kind of just putting a tiny bit of weight on the top, and then you'll see it coming away from there, and then kind of rotating that around. This is a much more exaggerated way of doing it. I'm just going to follow that circle round. Now, I do want to get all this black off, but I mean, I'm fully aware that that isn't a perfect circle, so a lot of it's going to be by eye of sort of pulling it up and then just having a look and seeing how that looks. So, right, let's get started on that. Same speed again, I'm on the lowest speed setting on my drill. You've got to be quite so accurate with the starting point on this one. Start doing that pivoting rotation now, and see that gradually growing. There we go. And you can just brush this stuff off, you know, this isn't going to hurt you from touching it. And it's important you do it this way and not just kind of, you know, start going in on the edges, because you'll end up then with quite a lumpy, well, sort of recessed, and what we want is this to be a sort of perfect dome. So I'm always going back, if I pull it away and have a look, I'm always then going back to the centre and then slowly kind of working my way out. And the good thing is, once you've got a dome in here, it sort of holds that ball in there, you know, so once it's in, you can sort of move it around and it will stay within it. So it's then makes it a little bit easier to kind of be a bit more accurate around those edges. Something like that. Okay, so that's enough for this bit. So let's take that off. What I want to do now is start grinding down to a kind of finer grit. So I've got this, which is actually the same grit, but because it's not a diamond tip, we can grind this down and make it a little bit sort of finer. And all I'm going to do that with is just another bit of glass. This is one of my test pieces before I got to where we're going now. So if I just turn the drill on, all I kind of want to do is get a load of grit to go inside the kind of grains of this grinding bit. So, I mean, you don't have to use glass. This is just what I used, and it worked pretty well, so I'm just going with this. Because you do get these kind of dressing bits where if you're using like silicon carbide grinding wheels or anything like that, they get clogged up, and then you use a dressing bit to get all the sort of rubbish out of them. But what I'm kind of doing is the reverse, which is clogging this up, so it's a little bit smoother than it is from when you get it off the shelf. So anyway, that's how I'm going about doing that, rather than going through the whole process, I'll do a kind of, here's one that I made earlier. So that's the exact same kind of bit, but nice and clogged up. So all I'm going to do now is do the same kind of thing as I have done grinding the little punties, but just kind of put this in there to almost sort of sand them down a little bit. So let's get started. Let's move this camera. Okay, loads better. Now on to the next phase of grinding. So now we're on to the final bit of grinding before we do any of the polishing. And this, I got stuck here for ages, and I mean days, because I kept using things like this. I was kind of taping felt on the edges of this grinding wheel and trying all sorts of different things. I tried jeweler's rouge, I tried a cutting compound, cerium oxide, but the mistake I was making is that I still needed to kind of grind that sort of rough edge off the glass before going deep and polishing. And my mate Omar, who I have regular contact with over kind of glasswork, I was kind of texting him my results, and he said, you need something like wood. You need to kind of get that rough bit off that the kind of grinding wheels have done. So I made this little bit here. All that is a bit of oak, and I'll show you how I made it. Got a hole saw, which is obviously just goes on a drill, that drills through, cuts out a perfect little bit of oak, which I then just put on a bolt. So then when that's in the drill bit and that's spinning, you can just hold sandpaper on it and kind of, you know, create a nice smooth shape on it. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So there's the bit, you can see just a little bit of oak, bolt on either end holding it in. So I'm not going to cover the process of making that because hopefully that's self-explanatory. Put my drill on. I'm also going to dial the speed up. And then all you need is a bit of sandpaper. And then you can kind of, you know, round these edges off nicely. Because remember, this has got to be small enough to get into the little grooves that you've made. So, you know, the whole bit isn't, but, you know, some of these edge bits will. And, you know, sticking a little bit of the cutting compound or cerium oxide in there, you know, will just get rid of those sort of final little bits of sort of rough glass. So this is how I'd go about kind of making the bit, nice and easy, and sort of profiling it down. And then that's going to be our final bit before getting on to the polishing. So let's have a look how that works. Just going to move this up. So you might not see that that's doing a lot, but it does just take those tiny little bits off that make it a little bit easier for the polishing process. And the good thing about this is not going to do anything to your glass, you know, so it's not going to matter if you're sort of going out the lines here or anything like that. You know, this is really just to kind of rub something nice and hard over the surface of it and kind of, you know, yeah, like I said, just smooth out those bits. Okay, on to the polishing. So what I'm going to use for this is cerium oxide, and I just bought a kind of small bag. It wasn't expensive, I think it was just a few £, and you don't need very much of it, or certainly when you're working on the scale that I'm working in here. I've got some water, just a little thing to mix the water and the cerium oxide in, and these, which are tiny little sort of buffing drill bits that I got off Amazon. This was like £15 for the whole set, and this is what finally got me the result I was after. So firstly, I've been using this bit already, so I may as well use that. Just for context, the way this is usually done, in the same way as the grinding is usually done, is with a large wheel. Now this would be a large kind of polishing wheel. In the bottom there would be cerium oxide, so it would be able to remain moist. I haven't got that luxury, but that's fine. You know, this is a very basic way of doing this, and you can, you know, figure out your own contraptions as to how to keep this thing covered in the kind of solution. But for now, all I'm going to do is pop some of this in a little bowl. So one thing to know about this is you're not really looking for a sort of mixture as in a consistency, or that's what I've found, and that's because it doesn't really mix. You like put water in it, this will become waterlogged and sink to the bottom, and then it'll be, you know, water on top. I'll show you what I mean. So that's quite a lot of powder, you'd assume, for a kind of dribble of water, but you know, that kind of, the water stays on top and the sort of substance sinks to the bottom. So I'm just going to put some water in there. Oop, that might be a bit much, but it doesn't really matter, as long as it's all in the bottom there. And the reason I'm mixing it with my finger is because this is glass polishing, or this, well, it's polishing compound, and man, when you do it with like a spoon on here, it's like nails down a chalkboard. So yeah, you see in there, you know, how that's all just like gunked at the bottom, and that's what I want to cover the kind of polishing bit with. So let's just kind of get a load of that on there. I mean, I actually have put too much water in there, so I'm just going to put a little bit more of this in here. And I mean, that's from yesterday. The reason I'm not using that is just because I wanted to, you know, mix it for the purposes of the video, but I'll reuse that. I'll put some water in there and keep reusing it, so it's not a waste. So let's just move this over here. Let's cake that on here. And as well, in terms of the speed, I'm not fussed either about going the slowest. You know, I'm going to get the RPM up on this, so I'll start on the slowest just so that it doesn't splash this stuff everywhere, which it did go everywhere in the trial process. But anyway, that's it. Let's get going. Starting on the lowest. Let's get that speed up a little bit, and just get that in there. It might not be wet enough at the moment, but it's easily resolved. Cake this stuff on here. And I'm, you know, applying a firm amount of pressure. Might turn the speed up a little bit soon as well, but let's just kind of see how this goes. And again, don't worry about kind of going out the lines with this. It's nice to sort of stay as accurate as you can, but you know, it doesn't really matter. Need a bit more of that on there. One thing to know, this isn't a quick process. You know, this does take patience. You know, you're gonna be here for, I don't know, not hours certainly, but you know, it hasn't got that kind of instant satisfaction of, say, something like sandblasting, where once you've blasted the surface you've got instant results. This, yeah, just requires the kind of patience of eventually grinding that down and polishing those scratches out. So but it's worth it. It's, you know, I mean, a lot of the techniques I cover are, you know, they're very rare. People don't, you know, not a lot of people practice them. This in particular is extremely rare, just because of how difficult the materials are to get hold of, or not the materials, the actual tools. You know, the grinding wheels for brilliant cutting, nigh on impossible to come by unless you kind of handed them down from an ex-professional. So, you know, this is certainly not perfect, but I mean, it's a step in the right direction. You know, I'm going to be taking this experimentation a lot further, trying, you know, to create my own sort of different discs with different profiles, so you can do more than just the punties. You know, do some really nice kind of V-carve flourishes to kind of, yeah. You can see that's already polishing through there. That is coming up really nice. And I mean, I haven't sped up this video, so I mean, it's only taken a few minutes to get to there. But obviously, when I say patience, you know, it comes to doing some of these huge pieces like Dave Smith does. And you think, man, I mean, I know he's got the right equipment, but it must take days to finish, or just finish in the kind of polishing process. There you go, look at that. Ooh. Needs a clean, but that is pretty much what we're going for. So I'll just time lapse the rest. I'm going to go through, do those other ones. I'm going to do absolutely nothing different to this. You know, that's going to fit perfectly. You know, the bit is the right shape, so that's going to be fine. So I'm just going to go finish these and then see how that looks. So that's where we're at the moment. Looking good, but you know, you can see close up, there's still a few little minor scratches that need to come out, but you know, that is, I don't know, 10 minutes work. So yeah, well chuffed with that so far. So just going to carry on exact same method, just caking that cerium oxide on there and just buffing that out until they're perfectly clear. Okay, so that's how to do the punties. Now I'm going to move on to the kind of leaf effects that you can create. And this, just a kind of 120 grit silicon carbide disc. I think it was about £2. And these, or this, is a dressing tool. I got this in a box of 3 for I think £10, or it might be £15, I can't remember. But that's what I'm going to use to shape this disc, and very straightforward. So I'm just going to turn the drill on. And then just coming in from here. And it's up to you how you do this. I'm going to do this quite shallow so that it creates quite a wide leaf as I push it in. But, you know, you could do this so it's really pointed. So it's getting there. I just want that to be a point in the middle. There you go, I'm happy with that. Right, so let's mark up the bit of glass. Right, so here's our bit. Got our little punties in there, and I've just drawn, let's have a look, can you see that? Yeah, you can just see these little lines And I'm just going to press that on there and kind of move it up and down. Now this is quite a kind of shallow groove, so I don't think I'm going to have to do that much. So let's get started. I'm going to put the drill back on its slowest. So here's that, and that isn't very good, and that wasn't easy either, and there's a reason for that, and it's because this disc didn't come up as high as this. So when I was trying to sort of get flat on here, it was almost pushing me down here. So I've changed this disc for a bigger one, so this way I can get directly over the top, and I'm going to try and tidy those up. I'm not too fussed if they're not perfect, because, you know, this is experimental, and I want to see if I can polish out mistakes as well as just kind of, you know, dress the bits what I've cut into the glass. So let's try this now with the bigger wheel. There we go, and already I can feel that's so much easier and you've got so much more control. Yeah, that looks like a neater groove as well. So yeah, lesson learned there. Yeah, much nicer. Right, and now from that I'm just going to go straight onto the polishing. The reason I'm not going to do the wooden bit is that in this case the sort of thing was going in the direction that I want the leaf to go in. This is pure guesswork, but I think that's going to mean that this should polish out a lot easier than, say, the punties, where it had a groove going down a dome, which didn't look quite right. So, got one of, to show you, got one of these bits, just because it's got an edge, a sort of 45-degree edge. If that doesn't work, I'm going to go maybe for one of the pointed bits, and then try and kind of, you know, get that in there and just use the tip. But for now, let's just see how this goes. And look at that, that has polished out well quick. I mean, it's not perfect, but you know, that took a couple of minutes, and you know, so much quicker than the punties, and I think that's looking really nice. So hopefully I can just buff out that little bit there and it'll look all right. So I mean, it's not even, but that doesn't matter. But yeah, I'll put the rest on time lapse and then see how that looks at the end. And that's the whole process. So what I'm going to do now is create a small panel, and I'm going to use those kind of techniques to add sort of nice little punties and effects to it. I'm going to be running through most of it as a time lapse. So if you are new to the channel or haven't seen these particular videos before, I'm going to put a link to those up here. That way you can see those processes in depth and how I do them. One thing I do want to say, which I discovered along the way in making this piece, is that when you use frosted glass or sandblasted glass and you're using the kind of cerium oxide to polish out the rough bits, that is impossible to get off of the etched glass. You know, no matter how much you kind of rinse it, scrub it with a brush and stuff like that, that stains it. So what I had to do is create a separate mask after I'd finished all the polishing, and then put it back in the sandblaster to sort of blast away all of those bits that had the sort of cerium oxide stains on. So that's not in the video, but I just wanted to kind of cover that on here because that will be a very useful bit of information, because it was a right pain just trying to scrub that off. Anyway, I'm going to crack on with the piece now and see how it turns out.